Children are the joy of the world, so full of wonder and amusement as they see their surroundings for the first time. Nothing is more important than maintaining their sense of innocence, especially when it's your own child. But imagine your kid falling victim to a tragedy and being completely helpless to do anything about it. This is the reality that James Ryan claims to face. In 2015, a channel named Jimmy's Wish was launched, and since its inception, it has remained relatively obscure to this day. The channel's first video was uploaded on August 2nd, 2015, entitled "Caught on Tape, Horrifying Atrocity on an 11-Year-Old American Child in Japan Condoned." In the video, a father named James Ryan records his son, Jimmy, who is bedridden in a vegetative state with a breathing tube and bloodshot eyes covered by bandages.
Jimmy, Jimbo, shaking right now. Right now he's non-responsive. He's shaking because he's unbelievable hot, fever. We've tried to bring his fever down.
It's a sad sight to see, but what's even more depressing is what the father claimed happened to him. According to the description, when Jimmy was 11 years old, the doctors in a Japanese hospital suffocated him with a plastic bag until he was severely brain damaged. In his current state, he suffers from rickets, hip and shoulder fractures, and other skeletal deformities. His reason for documenting all of this is to bring awareness to these crimes because the government refused to do anything about it. Throughout the rest of the videos on his channel, he continues to show us disturbing imagery of the deteriorating condition of his son as he pleads for help. On November 19th, 2015, he expands a little more on the reason behind why this was done to his son. And it gets a little weird from here. The father claims what happened to Jimmy was retaliation for him threatening to expose criminal misconduct among a medical organization. The following is a timeline of events that he is claiming. December 25th, 2007, he receives an email from a board director saying, "Be careful of your actions, be concerned about your future." December 26th, Jimmy's mother receives a phone call saying, "Police will never investigate, this will only become a problem for your son." December 28th, Jimmy is suffocated with a plastic bag by Japanese military doctors. February 12th, an email is received saying, "Depending on your future actions, your problems will worsen." We are given this terrifying narrative, but as sad as the situation is, there is still a great reason to be skeptical of what we're being told. The story dances on the line between sounding absurd and resembling some bizarre conspiracy theory. And it certainly doesn't help when you pay attention to the strange way that James Ryan is presenting all of this. The way the father dramatizes the videos with corny music feels like some cheap way to attempt to elicit emotion.
Jimmy, look at me, please. Jimbo, please. Jimmy, Jimbo, I'm over here.
And the father often comes off as disingenuous when he's talking about this.
I'm an American living in Japan with my family. Your signature is now the only way to save my son's life and to bring transparency to the heinous crimes that have been committed and condoned in Japan by widespread corruption. Please share on Facebook, on Twitter. Your signature and transparency will have the police forced to move in the media to finally report these heinous crimes and allow my son to be given his human rights back in therapy.
And all of these videos are filled with jumbled, discordant text on the screen that makes things incredibly difficult to follow. I've translated all the text in each of these videos, and it's extremely repetitive. Sure, maybe this could be written off as a father's disorganized reaction to such a traumatic event, but the whole thing seems so contrived that it's only natural to question the father's narrative. As far as evidence of these claims go, there's not much to go off of. James redirects us to a series of websites and other YouTube channels he has, but they all just regurgitate the same claims he is making without showing much evidence. You'd think in this situation, instead of constantly bombarding our eyes with a disarray of text, he'd want us to see things that are completely irrefutable. But he never actually shows us screenshots of these threatening emails he claimed to receive. The most he's ever done is show us an audio recording of the doctors quote-unquote admitting to putting a plastic bag over Jimmy's head. I translated the 20-minute recording to English, and I didn't think any of it was as damning as what he is saying. The recording seemed to just consist of Jimmy's mother arguing with one of the doctors. It seemed more like she was just confused about the medical procedures taking place. The only time a plastic bag is mentioned in this conversation is this excerpt. Throughout the entire conversation, when they're talking about Jimmy's blood oxygen levels, the terminology changes from terms like paper bags, plastic bags, oxygen masks, and ventilators. It's not very easy to follow, and I'm also sure that some of what we are reading also may have been lost in translation. On a Reddit thread talking about this, a native Japanese speaker weighed in on the conversation. They said, "The recordings of the doctors and the nurses, from what I could hear, are not nearly as malicious as what the parents are making them out to be." They mentioned that the reason why they utilized a plastic bag, not tied around his neck but held up against his mouth, was because he was out of breath and panicking. It's relatively outdated to do this, since holding up a bag to help someone with breathing has no real benefits. This unfortunately seems like a case where the parents are deluded and think they are being persecuted, while at most the hospital is incompetent and outdated in their methods. I have a lot of doubts that it was intentional and part of a conspiracy. What's interesting is that this isn't the first time James has claimed that medical practitioners have done something unethical to his son. One of the websites that James directs us to is jimmyswish.com. Unfortunately, at the time of writing this website was closed to the public without a password. But when I was researching this, the website was open. I only have a couple of screenshots of some of the pages I saw, but I took plenty of notes. You're just gonna have to trust me on this one. The website, which appears to have been written by Jimmy's mother, claims that in 1996, when Jimmy was 2 months old, he was unethically experimented on by corrupt doctors. One doctor, who she names as Kiyoshi Sato, allegedly drilled a hole in Jimmy's brain and took out the brain tissue and bones to research hydrocephalus. The mother provides pictures of these nursing records to try and tell us that Jimmy was 100% healthy before this happened. She goes on to claim that just 3 months later, another doctor named Shinichi Najima administered a lethal dose of midazolam and thiopental to Jimmy. She acknowledges that these substances are sometimes used in surgery, but says they were given to Jimmy in a neglectful way, causing him to stop breathing and suffer a cardiac arrest. According to her, no one showed up to help. These were the only claims made on this site, and once again, there really isn't any evidence to back it up. Nonetheless, it's still interesting that they claim all of this was done more than a decade prior to the plastic bag incident. Yet James never mentions this anywhere else. In fact, there are actually times where James claims the opposite. It's important to know about James Ryan's background because this provides a lot of insight into the current situation. James is currently the CEO of a few different genetic modification biotech companies, one of which is called Elpis Aremo. Here's an excerpt of him speaking about this company on the Future in Review YouTube channel.
Elpis Aremo is a miraculous breakthrough in precision technology that can target the tissue in place and modulate the signaling pathways and have them produce powerful proteins and gene expression to basically reprogram the cells in place to induce the body to self-heal without the use of injecting stem cells.
According to this website, they are researching ways to engineer the body to, in a way, reprogram itself to regenerate. In addition to Elpis Aremo, he's also the CEO of 2 other companies called Omgenium and Armadyne. These companies are also pursuing the same goal, regenerative medicine. They're setting some incredibly ambitious goals, like developing cures for currently incurable diseases, reverse aging, and something called Project Immortality. A lot of the things talked about on these websites push the boundaries of mainstream science and walk the fine line between woo-woo stuff and science fiction. How he plans to actually achieve any of this is unknown. He never goes in depth about any of the actual methods they're using, and the only page of the website I see that could possibly give me more insight into exactly what they're doing is the technology page. But of course, this page is also inaccessible without a password. On James Ryan's page on Elpis Aremo, we learn some valuable information about him. It says that he began his research into regenerative medicine after experimental stem cell therapy helped save his son's life in 1998. This is interesting for 2 reasons. 1, it means that Jimmy has been sick for pretty much his entire life. 2, this interestingly contrasts with what we read on jimmyswish.com, where his mother talked about some type of experiment ruining Jimmy's life, whereas here, James is talking about an experimental treatment saving Jimmy's life. In 1999, James created a stem cell company in Japan called Jimmy's Investment Group to develop a cure for his son. All of James's work with stem cell companies goes very far back. In 2011, he became the CEO of a stem cell company called ApplyCell, and then in 2012, he ran another company called iHorus. But we can go back even further to one of his earliest companies, Arblast, which resulted when 2 other stem cell companies merged in 2005. The website for Arblast is still up and running to this day, and is an incredibly valuable piece of the puzzle. James Ryan's work with Arblast had a massive influence on what we see from him today. Remember that James claims that his son's condition is a result of him threatening to expose corruption within a medical company. Well, on the website jimmysthemis.com, we learn a lot more about that situation. This site details the conflicts between Arblast and 2 other companies he worked alongside called Forticell Bioscience and Stem Cell Sciences. Note that Stem Cell Sciences is the trademark holder of ApplyCell, another company that James Ryan was the CEO of. On the website, James writes that in December of 2007 at a shareholders board meeting, it was announced that one of the stem cell science advisors confessed to a lot of their funding being fraudulent. James, wanting to expose this, allegedly received emails and phone calls, some of which included threats to his son. Of course, once again, we're not given proof of this. There are some emails included on the site, but I've translated all of them to English, and none of them mention any threats like this. Later that year, the alleged plastic bag incident is said to have happened. Somewhere in this timeline, Forticell Bioscience signs a memorandum of understanding with Arblast, but ends up going bankrupt. This leaves Arblast as the last one standing, and James thoroughly convinced that his son's worsening condition has something to do with this. Many years and many companies later, we get to what we see now, a hopeless, desperate James Ryan. There are many theories surrounding exactly what is going on in James Ryan's head right now. Some people think he's some sort of paranoid schizophrenic, while others think he's a serial con artist exploiting his son's condition to get funding for his companies. But I don't agree with any of those theories. Here's what I think. I don't think James is crazy in the typical sense, and I definitely don't think he's exploiting his son's condition for some type of financial gain. That would be incredibly messed up, and I really don't think that's what's going on here. Especially with not a single GoFundMe page or anything like that. The most he ever asks from anyone in his videos is for them to sign his change.org petition. I think James's son, Jimmy, was born with a degenerative disease that rapidly took hold. In some very old pictures where we see Jimmy, it's clear that at the beginning stages of his condition, he was still relatively normal. But James found out about Jimmy's diagnosis very early on. He was likely told that there is no cure for his son's disease, and I think he couldn't accept that. Who could? At this lowest point in his life, I think he was introduced to some of the research going on with stem cells, and that gave him a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, if this worked, he could save his son. I mean, James's earliest company in 1998 was named after Jimmy, and he was never interested in this regenerative medicine stuff before that, ever. Even in his later companies, where he makes these unrealistic goals that seem like they might sell well, his main focus has always been Jimmy. I think in a desperate attempt to save Jimmy, he dedicated his life to this kind of work. And somewhere along the line, he realized this may have all been for nothing. Let's face it, a lot of biotech companies can be super sketchy. Take a moment to imagine what it must feel like to dedicate over a decade of your life to saving a loved one, only to realize in the end that there was never a chance to begin with. It's heartbreaking. I truly think that this broke him. He felt betrayed and he felt angry. He needed someone to blame. So I think these delusions that we're seeing are just a manifestation of that denial. Your life's work falling apart as you lose your son. I don't know what James Ryan is going to do from here, but the whole situation is incredibly tragic, and I really do feel for him. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the flip side. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around till the end. Now, I did have to censor out quite a bit of this video to meet YouTube guidelines, but the full uncensored version is available on Patreon, plus you get a bunch of other cool perks too, like weekly live streams and access to my Discord server. Also, a big thanks to these guys for supporting the merch, I really appreciate it.